Okay, let's get started. We got a lot to cover, and I'm anxious to get going with it. My name's Scott Webb. I've been editor of Aqua for 21 years now. Started in the year 2000. I've got a technical background, so subjects like this really fire me up and get me interested. There's a lot of interesting technology here, and it's been well applied for this use. Uh, I'm editor of Aqua, which is the leading magazine for the pool and spa industry. Every year we have 15,000 decision makers in the pool and spa industry that we reach in print. And over the world, we reach about 500,000 people come to our website for information on everything from pool chemistry to uh, any kind of technology to servicing pools, building pools, retailing pool equipment, and so forth. Today we've got with us Tyler Baljon, who's Vice President of Spec Pumps, Pool Products, the North American franchise of the German company Spec Pumpen. Taylor has been in the industry and has become an expert on technology to do with the product that we're discussing today. Spec Pumps builds pumps for many different industries across the globe, from medical devices to vacuum pumps, all the way down to swim jets. And today we're going to learn about one product in particular. Got a lot to get over, so Taylor, can you take it from there?
Yeah, thanks for the introduction. I hope everyone can hear me all right. So I'll go over a little bit of what we're going to get started with today. I want to give you guys a little bit of color on Spec, who we are, our history, etc. Like he said, it's a German company, so it's a little bit different. Then we'll get into swim systems, what they are, what some of the differences are. We'll get into the benefits of swim jets in particular. Then I'll talk about our systems. And then beyond that, we'll get into the nitty-gritty of installations and problems that people have, how to not screw this up, basically. So going ahead and getting started, let's talk a little bit about Spec history. So you may not know that we're a German company. We've been in business for more than 100 years now. It all got started with Daniel Spec back in 1909 in Nuremberg, Germany. It's actually on its 5th generation now, which is another Daniel Spec. But the really short story here is that basically they built their first pump in 1910. That sort of business started to take off. He brought his sons into the business. As things progressed, they got into different industries. So got into dairy, this being Germany. They obviously got into brewing, different factories for different types of pumps. But where we really come into play in our division of Spec is with the pool pumps. And so Spec's real claim to fame in that regard is in 1968, we brought out the first all plastic pool pump period in the market, which was the BADU 19. For our purposes and the purposes of this presentation, where this really gets interesting for us is actually on swim jets in particular. And so here you can see on this slide, this is actually the world's first swim jet system. This was built on Willie Spec's own pool. In 1973, he had it, that was the 3rd generation of Spec. He had it built on his own pool in bronze because nothing existed like that at the time. We eventually figured out how to build that in plastic. We sold our first one of them in the US in 1978. That business took off, and by 1983, we had opened our own factory. Now, we've done a lot of different things in the meantime. We produce all sorts of different products, a lot of commercial pumps as well. But we still remain loyal to the core business of swim jets. And so that's obviously what I'm going to be talking with you guys about today. Now, briefly, swim systems in general. There's a number of different ways to do this to allow somebody to swim in the pool. And so I want to talk with you in an honest way about other style systems and other ways to skin this cat, basically. One of the ways that you can go about swimming, the very most basic, is a tether, all right? And that's just a string that goes from somewhere outside the pool is strapped to somebody's body and allows them to swim against it. That's very much the cheapest way to get this done, but it's also the most annoying. Nobody really wants to wear something, and it's not all that effective. Other systems that are out there, the one that's in the photo right in front of you, that's a paddle wheel system. Most of you will be familiar with that style system, that paddle wheel. That right there is an endless pool, which fine practically pushes out a ton of water, but it's got some drawbacks. If you can see right there, obviously what we're getting at here is something that's extremely visible within the pool. It's not something that you can hide away. And one of the major drawbacks of this is that it's going to mess with the aesthetic of the pool. And in our experience, the aesthetic is much more important than the ability to swim at all. Nobody wants to make that puddle in their backyard ugly. Most of them just want to stare at it most of the time. The other thing is that this is a hydraulically driven system. So you have oil that's actually coming in to that unit there and then back out. That can leak into the pool eventually, and that's something that would also not make your customer super thrilled. That's for paddle wheel systems. Other styles are propeller driven systems, so basically a boat prop. More on that later. We do have a system that's coming out in that regard, but I'll get to that at the end. For now, I want to talk with you specifically about jetted systems, which, as I mentioned, are our bread and butter. Now, what is a swim jet? Really, really basic. If you've ever felt a return in a pool, water coming out, it's pretty straightforward. This, in its essence, is a very, very big return at the most basic, at the simplest level of explanation. Essentially, you have a return connected to a pump, and that's going to make a counter current swim system. So the big difference here is that we've got a pump separate from the body of water. There's nothing that we have to stick physically inside it except for the returns. And that's why I mentioned this is something that you can hide a lot better. Now, by having a nozzle and creating a current that way, you do things a bit differently. You don't need all flow. If you have a flow-based system, you need an absolute ton of water to have somebody swim against. If you do this with jets, you can utilize flow and pressure. And that means you can get away with a good deal less flow. Now, the weakest system that we recommend is still 400 gallons per minute, but it's significantly less than you would have from an endless pool. So I'm going to talk.
Taylor, I'm just going to say that's an interesting point to make about the difference between flow and pressure and flow. And I think you have to have either some experience with it to really understand that it's a totally different experience when you add pressure and flow. Can you think of any examples of how, practical examples people have seen that sort of illustrates that?
So it's just a different style of swimming. One is going to be much more intense. The flow style systems is going to be a much larger amount of water physically coming at you. And typically that's going to make this whole thing a lot more expensive. If you do this with a pressure-based system, you can take it and make it basically more simple. They're both getting the same job done. It's just a little bit of a different style. One is going to create a massive amount of flow that you can't escape. The other one is a bit more targeted.
Gotcha.
Now you can see that right there on this slide. You can see how the three jets are kind of coming together at that physical swimmer. But I'll keep moving here. I'm going to get into a little bit what the benefits are, why your client might want one of these swim jets in the first place, why you would even want to go down this road. And at a basic level, the main thing that you're getting done here is swimming in a pool. That's pretty straightforward, pretty obvious. Swimming is a fantastic workout. It's one of the most calorie intensive workouts that you could possibly do, actually much more so than running. You're using your entire body as opposed to just your legs, just your arms, anything like that. So total full body workout. So you can actually get things done much faster when you're swimming than you might be able to in another setting. people that are looking to do this in their backyard, if you've got that kind of clientele, how do you recognize it? Well, it's the same kind of customer that would be doing a Peloton, for instance. These larger high ticket items that are especially popular, especially during COVID, to do exercise in their own backyard outside of a gym setting. And these are high ticket items. These are very expensive items. People expect to pay up to $5,000 for a Peloton, and our baseline system that I'll get to, that 400 gallons per minute, that's going to be a similar buy. It's in that similar range. Swimming also, it's a very low impact workout, something that can last an entire life. So, if you're running, anything like that, messing with your knees, that's not something that's going to work out for a long time. So this is something that you can sell, especially to an older clientele, as something that they're going to be able to keep up with, keep exercising as they age into that house that they just bought. It's not just swimming though. When I say running, you can also use these swim jets for underwater jogging. That's especially popular, again, with the sort of older clientele, because it's great for customers with knee and hip issues. Now, I know this especially well, personally, having a hip replacement. This is a way that you can get exercise done without putting any weight physically on your bones, on your muscles. This is actually the only way that I can run right now. So I guess it's a little bit personal here. One of the things that you want to keep in mind when you're doing these swim jet systems is if you want to use it for underwater jogging, this kind of setup, you definitely have to place this in the shallow end. A lot of customers try and think that you might want to put in the deep end, that's the best part to swim, but if you want to use it for multiple purposes, putting it in the shallow end will allow you to do multiple styles of exercise and really get the full use of these swim jet systems. Now, there are other places that take this effect and take it kind of to a different level. So we actually sell a lot of jet systems into hydrotherapy. So we'll sell these to hospitals, rehab clinics, that sort of thing, and they take it to a different place. So rather than just jogging on the bottom of the pool, they'll place a treadmill underneath, and so that allows for a full rehab setup. So if you've got injured legs, anything like that, you can run against this current, taking all of the weight off of those injuries, and this is all within like a hospital setting. The massage hose that we have for these jets allows you to relax the muscles and whatnot during the process. That does come with several of our units included. Otherwise, it can be added as an option. Just so you guys see it here, you can see on his leg what that looks like in practice. Now, at the ultimate end of that scale is what we use for sports medicine. Now, this is a more intense version of that hospital unit. And basically what you have here is you've got our 400 gallon per minute jet system combined with, generally speaking, about a 10 mile per hour treadmill. And this is actually used by about half of the teams in the NFL, MLB, NBA, NHL. All of them use this on their facilities to retrain athletes after injuries. It's been especially popular in terms of retraining running backs after ACL, MCL injuries, because they can get a full range of motion in, do their full training without actually putting any weight on their sore joints, and it can take a couple weeks off their recovery. I can't give a full list of these teams right here. I'm sure you guys know the NFL is pretty tight in its legal department. But if you have any questions or you want to know if your favorite team does use this system, I'd say it's likely, but give us a call afterwards and we can talk about it. One of the nicest parts about these systems is that while I talked about them in the same breath as a Peloton or a treadmill, one of the downers of those systems is that if you get one, not everybody is as committed, shall we say, to their exercise routine as they think they will be. And if you've got a bike or you've got a treadmill in your house and you don't end up exercising the way that you thought you were, it's a huge downer because then you wasted a whole bunch of money. The nice part about swim jets is that while it's originally intended for that kind of exercise, we actually find that at the end of the day, the largest users of these systems, despite what people might protest, will be the children. And this provides a way for kids to have fun that really changes how they look at the pool in the first place. You know, it takes it from a still body of water to an active, moving body, and really allows their imaginations to kind of go nuts. We find that the whitewater effect in the pool allows them to play all sorts of games. You'll find kids that want to run and jump in the water. You'll have, you know, kind of make it look like a water park for them. What we find a lot of out in the field, and you can see photos of that here, are kids that want to boogie board against this thing. So they'll, you know, run and jump with their boogie boards against the current, or they'll tether them to the front of the system and kind of race each other. But it's not even limited to that. I mean, people do really silly things with these jets, and you know, keep in mind that before you do anything really crazy, give us a call. But I mean, I've seen people wakeboard against them. Again, wouldn't recommend that. But or you know, do lazy rivers with that kind of thing. Or even we've seen people put them at the bottom of slides so that when the kids hit the water, they get knocked across the pool. All kinds of different things that are not necessarily swimming related, but that add to the fun of the pool, add to that water park effect that people are going for these days in their backyards. You know, as you know, all of you are aware, Americans are just absolutely dumping money back there. Finally, in terms of benefits, I'd also like to talk about the simple fact of expanding your pool. A lot of the time, the customer that's wanting this swim jet is not the customer that's coming to you and asking for it. They're going to be asking you for something coded totally differently. Instead, you'll have a customer that says, I want to swim laps, okay? And in their mind, they've got a 100-foot-long pool that they're going to swim laps in their backyard, and that's how they're going to do exercise. But you're going to have to disabuse them of that notion in the sense that, well, first of all, they can't afford it. And second of all, it's not going to fit even if they could afford it. So a lot of builders would say, well, that's too complicated, and they would stop there. But there's a good deal of money in this for you if you can explain to that customer, hey, you know, we can actually build that pool that you want. It's going to be smaller. It's going to fit in your backyard. We're going to put a swim jet in it, and that's what's going to allow you to swim. So we can put something in your backyard that's going to fit that yard itself, but it's also going to fit your budget. And that's, I guess, to put it all together, those are some of the major benefits. We could go on at length about it, but I'm going to take a little break here. I'm going to jump into a video for a second, and I'll show you what this looks like in practice. All right, so jumping back into this, if everyone can hear me. Oh, hang on. All right, so now I'm going to get into our actual types of swim jet systems and how we get this done on a much more granular level. I'm going to start here, package A. This is our most common, our most popular swim jet system. Represents about 70% of what we're actually selling in terms of swim jets. That system comes with 2 jets, you can see right here, 1 4-horsepower pump, and a control box that's Wi-Fi enabled. That whole system usually is going to go to a dealer for a bit north of $3,000. Dealer is typically going to double their cost on that then add $1,000 for install. So we typically see these systems installed at about $7,000 to $8,000 is just a sort of round number for what you should be charging for this thing. Don't undersell it. Keep in mind, when I talk about this in the same breath as a Peloton, this kind of system is going to be something that you can make good money on. Don't sell yourself short. But to get into the details here, this system is going to produce 400 gallons per minute. Okay, that's enough for a basic workout, an endurance workout, a long-term half hour, something like that, to get your full exercise in. It's not for sprinting against, and I want to make that clear. We'll get to the next slide, and I'll go into systems that you can sprint against. But this is just for a swim, okay, for an endurance workout. And for that, it's plenty. Obviously, if this is 70% of what we sell, most customers are perfectly happy with this. One of the reasons that this is the most sold system we have is that combined jet housing. So if you can see the two housings there, you'll notice that they're both suction and discharge. Now, what does that do for you? If you have suction and discharge on the same fitting, it means that you don't need to have any main drains. You've only got 2 holes in the pool. It's all very straightforward and easy from an install perspective. Having no main drains also makes it safer, actually, than you would with that, because there's no way to block those off completely. Even if you were to cover the face plates here, you'd still have gallons coming out at you. And so from a VGB perspective, from an entrapment perspective, this is actually considerably safer. Those housings are also very low profile. So in comparison with the endless pool style system that I showed you before, this is going to be very easy to hide in the water of a pool. The main fact being here that customers aren't going to want to see this in their pool. They want the practicality of a swim jet system. They definitely do not want to see it, don't want to know about it. They just want to turn it on and have water come out. On the system that you can see in front of you, you can adjust the flow. It's really easy. You reach inside. It's pretty straightforward. Like I mentioned, it's got Wi-Fi. And you can also cover everything that's going on here with different shapes, different styles. So if you, particularly popular these days is if you see the gray cover option, that's been extremely popular because French gray is so popular out in the market. Moving forward though, we've also got this package D. And like I was trying to explain, there are different systems for different style swimmers. And so while with our package A, that's good enough for your average swimmer, we do have this package D system, which is great for your stronger swimmers. This one is 3 jets, 2 pumps, and it's going to do 700 gallons per minute. And that's going to be enough to knock most people clean across the pool. So that's going to be, like I said, for your stronger swimmers. So specific categories that this comes up with a lot. Triathletes, and we'll find kids on the swim team. So like if you've got high school swimmers, that sort of thing, definitely want to go with the sprint system, this package D. That's going to be the only thing strong enough to keep them back from the wall. This one obviously will go a bit more expensive. That's probably going to go installed for more like $11,000, $12,000, something like that. Again, don't sell yourself short, but it's almost doubling the flow, so the price difference is there. Moving forward, you'll also see in the field some of our older style systems. So this is our Super Sport 2. And this was the more common system when we brought this stuff to the United States in the first place. Delivers the same 400 gallons per minute, but it's a bit of a different setup. So whereas the package A does that with 2 jet housings, the Super Sport does it with 1 fully integrated housing. So a lot of guys that are installing these like that a little bit better because it's only 1 niche that they have to worry about. That can be a little bit easier. It also has a light built in, so you can light up your swim lane, and then you've kind of got a 2-for-1. You've got a light niche combined with your swim jet, all in 1 installation. At the upper end of that is our Imperial system. That kits out the Super Sport entirely in stainless steel. All the knobs, all the buttons, all the nozzles, everything stainless steel. That's if if you've got a customer that's looking for more of the bling effect. This will go for about the same amount as the package D. You just have to, be straightforward with your customer. Do they want the practicality of all of that flow, or are they looking kind of for the bling effect in their pool and the stainless steel? It's about the same amount of money either way. Again, this has that same LED light. Everything else is the same as the Super Sport system. Now, should your customer be so unfortunate as to already have their pool installed, we do have an answer for that too. That's our BADU Inspiration, okay? This is an over-the-wall system, something that can be installed on existing pools. It's a pretty straightforward, easy drop-in installation. 4 bolts go into the deck, and it's going to produce actually a little bit more flow than our baseline systems. So producing 420 instead of 400, simply because that pump is so close to the water that there's no head loss. Problem is the same problem that endless pools has. One of these is going to be very obvious on your pool. You can't hide it away, and so it's going to ruin the aesthetic of the pool. Now, I'm honest about that, but it just is the case. Most people are not going to want to see a big hunk of plastic on the wall of their pool. For somebody that's determined to swim, though, this can be a good answer. But because of that, this represents maybe only 10% of what we sell. So, having talked about all of the different styles of systems that we have, I'm going to drop into the actual installation process a little bit here, and we'll get down and dirty in some of these details. When you're planning a swimjet system, the most important thing here, first of all, you need a space large enough to swim in. Now, we recommend what we say a clear unobstructed area. So a free area that's quite large, that's at least 15 feet long, 3 feet deep, and 8 feet wide. You're going to want to avoid also, when you're looking at this, we've got several different places that you can and can't install the system. The important part is not to put it in a corner. You don't really want it facing a curve, anything like that. You would want to put this in a straight wall. And the reason that you would want to do that is so that you have enough flow coming back into the unit. So that flow is not obstructed as it tries to come back into the unit. If you put it, say, for instance, in steps, or if you try and put it on the edge of a sun deck, that can mess with the flow a bit. And that would mean that your customer is not going to get the flow that they were anticipating, looking for. You're going to have a bad day.
Taylor, what if you're smaller than 15 feet long on that pool?
So we do get that question a lot of the time. And whenever you're thinking about the size of the pool, you want to think about it in terms of an actual person. So the reason that we say 15 feet long is that typically you're going to be pushed about 4 feet back from the jet, okay? And that's how you want to internalize this. So you're going to have your person swimming 4 feet back from the jet. And if you imagine that in your head, then you want to add 6 feet of person behind that. So we're at 10 feet from the wall now. And then you want to add another couple feet for the swimmer to move back and forth as they get tired. What you really don't want is that as that swimmer gets tired, gets pushed back further and further, that their feet kicking whack against the back wall. Now, it might vary. If you have a very small person, you have a little grandma, you might be able to go a little bit shorter. And if you've got a basketball player, you might want to go a little bit longer. In fact, if you've got a basketball player, you might want to go a little bit deeper than 3 feet. All of these measurements are based on the human body. So, 3 feet deep is enough room for a human arm to not whack the bottom. If they're a little bit bigger, you might want to think about that. So be honest with your customer, be honest with the size of that customer, and then you might be able to play with that 15 feet a little bit. But that's certainly something that, should you want to go smaller than 15 feet, give us a call at the factory. We do have actual people that answer the phone, and we'd be glad to walk you through the process of where would be the best spot in your pool for your particular swim jet. We do it all the time.
Makes sense.
In terms of physical installation, so when you're actually going about doing that, here, the most important part, and the most important thing not to screw up, is the pipe size. And I cannot emphasize this enough. Never for any reason go smaller than 4-inch pipe. 4-inch pipe is the absolute minimum. There is only so much water that you can jam through so much pipe. And if you go smaller than 4-inch, there's not a chance in hell that you're going to get 400 gallons per minute. Now, if you go beyond 30 feet, you'll even have to size it up a bit more. You'll have to go from 4-inch all the way up to 6-inch. And again, this is not something to screw around with because it's not something you can go back and fix later. Once you get that pipe in the ground, that's it. There's not a bigger pump that you can add because there's just no way that you can get more water through a certain amount of pipe, period. So I'll stress this, but it's very important. Other things that you want to be very careful about is the placement of the nozzles in the wall. So you want your jet nozzles to be 12 inches below the water level. Okay, why? So think about the jet nozzles coming at you, okay? You've got 2 jets coming straight at you. You ideally want them to hit you in the chest, to push you back while you're swimming, okay? And the best way to do that is to have them angled up at you from a little bit below. You want them at a shallow angle. So what we always say is that we want your 2 jets to come at you from slightly different angles and to come underwater together at 4 feet back. Now we do this for 2 reasons. So first of all, you want it coming at a shallow angle because you don't want your swimmer to be able to swim across the top, okay? If you put these at say 18 inches down, you're gonna start to have serious problems. At 18 inches down, you're so deep that the swimmer can physically swim across the top. And even if you angle your jets up to the surface, so much of that water is going to dissipate by the time it hits the swimmer that they're not going to get an effective swim. I know that other manufacturers have talked about putting a jet underneath, but in our experience, having done this since 1978, that's not effective. The best way to do this is to have this at the surface, the swimmer physically swimming at those jets. Now, we also do it with 2 jets, and this is important to consider. We do 2 jets spaced out. You want them spaced 1 foot apart. So a foot below the water line and a foot apart. And the reason that we do that is if you have 2 jets coming from slightly different angles, you can kind of lock yourself in the current. If you were to only have 1 jet coming at you, people tend to be stronger on one side or the other, right? And they'll tend to tell slightly to one direction or the other. So people will swim out of that current, typically to the right, they'll get around the front, and they'll complain that it's not strong enough. Whereas if you have 2 jets, you can lock a customer in that current, keep them balanced, keep them in place for the duration of their workout.
Taylor, I'm thinking about the stresses on that joint with the jet where it attaches to the PVC. Do you need any special kind of glue to keep that on there?
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure you're seeing the purple in the photo. You want to use a heavy body glue to connect the PVC to the actual jet housing. That's important to recognize, yeah.
Gotcha.
So moving forward, do keep in mind that you can install these systems on any type of pool, be it gunite, polymer, steel wall, fiberglass. I'm going to get to all of them eventually, but we're going to start with gunite. I'm a little biased in Florida here. And so we'll start with gunite installations. When you're doing a gunite installation of a BADU jet, the first thing that you want to do is build that manifold. You want that to be firm and separate when you hook it up. You're going to hook it, tie it off on your rebar, similar to any lightning. So it's pretty basic, it's pretty straightforward. But you want to make sure that that housing is flush with your plaster. If you've got a lot of people like to try and hide them, so they'll take that plaster out a little bit, but then the faceplate's not going to fit on and it's not going to get enough water. So you want to make sure it's flush. If you do it the other way around and it's sticking out a bit, well, that's just going to look wonky. So you really want to make sure that that plaster is flush. Otherwise, on a gunite install, it's really straightforward. This is probably the easiest way to get it done.
Taylor, I'm looking at that middle picture. How are the jets covered there in that shot?
So thanks for that. If you see in that middle photo, we've actually got gunite covers over both of those jet housings that you're going to want to put on before you shoot. to make sure that you don't get anything inside. They can be taken off afterwards, and they're included in all of our systems.
Oh, okay.
Moving on to vinyl liners, on these, you've got to go about things a little bit differently. So first and foremost, you're going to want to build the manifold afterwards. Okay, so first you're going to attach your housings to the wall. In the case of a polymer build, you're going to take your housing and clamp it to the wall. You're going to have a gasket basically between your housing and your polymer, and then on the other side you're going to have 2 screws that hold it in place. Then you're going to want to drop your liner. You'll put another gasket over the front of that and a clamping ring over the front of that. And then you can go about cutting your liner out. Steel wall pools are pretty similar, but you're going to need a special butterfly gasket. The butterfly gasket is there so that the walls of your steel pool don't rust over time. So something that's just not strictly necessary with polymer builds, but it's only a couple dollars. It's not a big deal, but do make sure because it's a special order. Once you've got all that in place and together, like I said, you can go ahead and cut out your liner, and you're basically good to go. It's pretty straightforward. Then you can build the manifold in the back. Important to note on the manifold, we get a lot of questions on these 2-jet systems that you can see right here. As you can see, we're coming in from the side, and a lot of people think that's kind of counterintuitive, and they'd rather come in with a T instead, but that's actually not possible. If you were to come in with a T, what you would do is you'd space the jets apart too much to make that happen. You'd have them more than 12 inches apart. And what that would result in at the end is that a swimmer trying to swim against the jets would actually go through the current right up the middle. And again, very unhappy customer. So make sure that when you're building this manifold, you're always coming in from the side and ideally using sweeps to get into that far housing.
Looks like it could be an auto cover track there. Can you put these onto a pool with an auto cover?
So you can, and it's something that can be complicated, and it just depends if you go about putting the jet on the same side as the auto cover. In an ideal world, you would put the jet opposite your auto covers so that they're out of each other's way. But I do realize there are a lot of customers out there that want to put them together on the same side, that they have the idea that that's a bit of a cleaner system. If that's your bag, if that's your cup of tea, do call the company and specifically ask for, there's a guy sitting over here next to me, Matthew Johnson, and he's our expert on walking people through that process because it is a little bit tricky.
Gotcha.
So I'm going to move forward here to fiberglass pools, the last of the major systems. And in a lot of ways, these are going to be similar to your polymer or to your steel wall builds. Obviously, you're going to have to cut the hole in the fiberglass, whereas in the steel wall, that'll usually come pre-punched. You're just going to use a 4.5-inch hole saw for the BADU stream systems. Those are the more basic designs. With a either a BADU Jet Imperial or a Super Sport, you'll want a jigsaw. It's going to take a couple blades. It's not a small system. You're gonna want to cut all the way around, and you would either cut based on the template that comes with every system, or if you feel more comfortable, you can put the clamping ring in place, clamp the whole system on, and then go about cutting it out. That's kind of the end of the line in terms of the install here. Scott, you think there's anything that I haven't mentioned?
Yeah, all the builders that I talk to now are just talking about DOE and what's coming there, and almost everything relates to that. Will these systems be affected by the DOE rule changes in July?
Right. So good point. If you saw earlier when I was going through the systems, I showed you briefly our 4-horsepower pump. So that's our model 2180. That's on all of our swimjet systems. Now that 4-horsepower pump is importantly not affected at all by the DOE rule change. One of the things that you want to remember when considering the DOE rule change, a lot of what you hear is that simply everything above 1 horsepower is going to have to be variable speed, but that's patently not the case. It only applies in specific contexts. So first and foremost, special application pumps, ones that don't have anything to do with the filtration, those are not affected. So the swimjet pump, the 2180, falls under that category because it doesn't have a basket, anything like that. So it's not a filtration pump. It's not affected by the DOE rules at all. We will continue to sell these to the end of the year and on into the future without problems. But I suppose an important point to note is that as a 4 horsepower pump, it also clears the DOE rules. Because once you get above 3 horsepower, you can go back to single speed pumps. So, you know, when you're in your standard variable speed pump, Superflow, IntelliFlow range, sure, you got to go variable speed. But once you get above that, once you get into 4, 5, 7.5 horsepower, you can start to use normal commercial pumps on residential jobs, say like our Model 95.
Oh, okay.
So now that I'm through all of that, and before I open it up to general questions, I did mention that we have a propeller-driven system in the works, and I want to show you that briefly as a bit of a teaser. So that's this system here, called the Turbo Pro. It's not ready yet. Still going through UL. It's physically ready. We've sold a couple hundred systems in Europe at this point. But it's a propeller-driven system, so there's no pipes required, anything like that, nothing that sticks over the wall. It's a system that's shot directly into the wall. And it's a big boy, don't get me wrong. This thing is 5 feet long and 1 foot tall, but it juices out 1,500 gallons per minute. So this is a system for like Division I swim teams. This is your real top of the line, knock it out of the park system. That's what we have coming in the works. I'm going to show you a little bit of what that looks like in practice and give you an idea of where spec is going with technology in the future. I'm going to bring that video up right now. All right, so back to life here. That system, one of the really neat things about it is it's magnetically driven. So there's no seal on this at all. It's something that we took from our industrial wing. It's a magnetically coupled and magnetically sealed device, I guess you would say. And so we can actually, you know, in Germany, they give a 5-year warranty on this thing. So it's pretty much bulletproof, and it's going to solve a lot of the issues around swim jets in general, because if there's no plumbing, this is just a much more simple system altogether. But like I said, this is kind of the wave of the future. This is something we'll be coming with, and I hope that over the course of this presentation, you've come up to speed on what swim jets are today.
Taylor, I just wanted to ask you a quick question. With that high a flow rate, can you swim with your friends with something like that?
Yeah, literally, as you saw in the video there, you can literally get two swimmers swimming right next to each other at the same time.
Right. The pool I go to, that's kind of a big deal. People kind of like to sort of race or swim side by side, or there's a bunch of high school kids swimming there, and they definitely like to swim side by side for
Yep,
sure.
yep, very much a competitive atmosphere with this product.
I actually picked up a couple questions here. Um, say I've got one from a builder who's just interested in what you've had to say and wants to know what the first step might be.
In terms of getting one of these.
Just, starting from zero, only knowing basically what you've said. Yeah, what's the, how do you start down this road?
So I would say first and foremost, if you've got a customer that's interested in one of these systems, go ahead and call in a spec. Like I said before, don't necessarily call Matthew Johnson for everything, but we do have a number of people that pick up the phones and will walk you through the best way. Like if you send in a design of what your pool is going to look like for your customer, we can tell you where the best place would be to put it in that pool to start that conversation with your customer. So I would say, just giving us a call, giving us a physical call would be the best way to start it up.
That makes sense. Do you have a slide there or a place where people can write down that number, or maybe an
Yep.
email address, or some place to send those inquiries?
Yeah, right here, that phone number at the bottom, that 904-739-2626 number, or customer service at spec-pumps.com.
Got you. And I know you touched on this a little bit before, but I've got another question here. How should I approach selling this to consumers?
So I would say, first and foremost, it's about, do you physically want to swim in your pool? Because this is something that's going to be very hard to set up later. When you're talking about this kind of stuff, it's all in the same conversation as your options package. We have a planning guide that, call us, ask for it. It's a basic flyer that will lead your customer through what our product is, what they need, or why they would want it, all of those things that I was talking about today. Drop us a line, we'll send you a bunch of these flyers, put them in your options package, and it'll sell itself to the customers. If they see that they can physically swim in the pool, they're going to pick that over, say, a rock waterfall or other items, that might be the same price. This is something in that same price range. A lot of customers have their, they've got their mind made up to put a couple options in, but this is one that's extremely practical that they'll actually use.
Gotcha. I've got a question from Megan, and she asks, will this be available commercially or just residential?
So both of these systems are available residential and commercial. Was she talking about the Turbo Pro or our SwimJet specifically?
Maybe just a breakdown.
Okay, well, either way, all of these things are available on the commercial side. It's, one or the other doesn't matter.
Sure. And that doesn't affect your DOE issues, does it? Whether it's commercial or residential, does it?
Does not one bit.
Okay, that's independent of all that.
In fact, on a commercial application, typically a commercial job site is going to be three-phase, and three-phase pumps on the whole are not affected by the DOE rule change at all.
Ah, gotcha. Okay, I think that's about all we've got in terms of questions. I want to remind everyone to note the phone number and the email on your screen, because that gives you the opportunity, should you later think of any questions or want to follow up with this, you can do so at those information points. And I'd like to thank everyone for coming today. I know I learned a lot, and thank you, Taylor. That was very informative. And we'll move on with the day. Thanks for coming.
All right. Thanks for having me, Scott.